Hello there, and welcome to the Impact Zone podcast. We're back once again, talking more TNA wrestling shenanigans. And, I want to talk about, sort of these branding shows where, you have a show where you have, Lockdown or Hell in a Cell or whatever it is, whatever show it is, and basically you have a show where basically every match or nigh on every match is a match on said stipulation or said sort of thing. Actually, Extreme Rules might be the one of the ones that follows this trend where basically every match is a hardcore match or some variant of a hardcore match, where that show actually I feel like it worked. There were lots of different stipulations, but they were all a variant of a hardcore match of some description. But for the most part, I think saying, oh yes, this is an experiment or whatever else it is to see how this goes, see what the reaction is. And again, the branding is somewhat there in some ways of saying, well, Lethal Lockdown, that's sort of Lockdown, that's sort of a big brand. People remember Lockdown very fondly in some ways. But again, it's one of those things that if you kind of look at it, it's kind of like, well, that's because in those, especially the first one, that they did, they were like, okay, how are we going to make each match different? We're going to have to do something different with all of these matches because otherwise it's going to get old really, really quickly and we're going to have to change things up and move things around. I believe the last match of the night was AJ Styles versus Abyss in the Six Sides of Steel. And they started on the outside fighting around the ring and whatnot and all of this stuff before they got in the cage. And they were only in the cage for a fairly short portion of the match, really. But yeah, again, that was one of the things that they did. They did these things where they were like, okay, how can we have something different and something different and something different? We're not just cage match, cage match, cage match. Because cage matches, that's what ultimately a lot of those were. The traditional, old school cage matches, the Lethal Lockdowns and the Hell in a Cells, they've just changed, the kind of the layout or some of the rules. Same with War Games and whatnot. It's just a variant of the steel cage or whatever, and whatnot. So, but yeah, any of these shows that are basically featuring one match type, or sort of that similar thing, I don't think they work. And I think that we've seen that, that experiment was kind of cool and whatever. But if you're not going to do something different with it each time that you're kind of putting those shows on, it's very difficult to, keep the interest going for the rest of the show. Yes, there's something else on the line, there's the world title on the line, or if you're seeing Joe Hendry or somebody that you really, really care about, coming up and winning the title or whatever else it is, it's yes, cool, yeah, that's there, and you can do stuff with that. But again, it's one of those things where you're well, you've got to have some more investment, not just, we're going to see Joe Hendry wrestle, maybe he'll win the title or whatever it is, or whoever it is, again, whatever, I'm just using that as an example or whatever. It's very, very difficult. It is incredibly difficult to keep that level of interest for the fans, for the wrestlers, for everyone that is, engaged in or, around that show, so, and it's very hard to create those shows, and it's hard to not have to replicate a show or seemingly replicate a show that you did last year, because it's well, what else are we going to do? We've got to have something different than the match we just had 5 minutes ago or whatever it was, and there's only so many storytelling beats that you can kind of do within a steel cage. I'm not going to just talk about steel cages. But like that sort of stipulation, though, these are the only shows that I think are stipulation shows that have come out sort of ever. So that's one of those things. I don't think stipulation shows should be done like that. I think stipulation shows should be done like the Royal Rumble, Elimination Chamber, frigging actually, Destination X. There we go. I actually just thought of another one, but I'll talk about that in a second. Money in the Bank. Like it should be done like that, where you have or maybe a couple of featured matches that are actually knockouts, knockdown. I just thought of another one. But yeah, those ones, they are featuring something specific, like the Royal Rumble, or the men's Money in the Bank, the women's Money in the Bank, the men's Royal Rumble, the women's Royal Rumble, the women's Elimination Chamber, the men's Elimination Chamber, whatever else it is. So that you've got all these things it's especially good because they all sort of are hankering around WrestleMania, and it all, Rumble, Chamber, Mania, that's all in that same space, and that's sort of the hottest period of time for WWE, especially at Mania is their hottest time. So it's one of those things where it's kind of like one of those things that it really works for itself. Like like Survivor Series used to do this as well. Like they'd have a few matches where it was like, oh yeah, there's 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, I don't know, whatever it was, Survivor Series themed matches, but there are other matches at Survivor Series. It's not just about this, traditional Survivor Series tag team match type concept. That's fine, obviously. I think TLC, that was one of the other ones that they came out with as a standalone like pay-per-view like a couple of times. They didn't do it a lot. What was it? Was it called Breakdown or something, or Breaking Rights or something, where it was like every match must end in submission or whatever it was. It was like, yeah, I guess you can do stuff with that, but it's like when you're so limited to saying, oh yes, everything's ending in submission or whatever it is, it's like, then like again, as I was saying with like the other matches, it's like it takes away from the other matches because they're not distinct enough, and everyone's got to try to fit into this thing that really inhibits their creativity, or really inhibits anyone else from standing out besides the couple of wrestlers that would suit their story, or would suit their angle, or would suit their gimmick, or whatever else it would be for. So it's really, really not a good idea to do overdo these things on these shows in many, many ways. So Destination X, Knockouts, Knockdown, I think those are 2 shows. I think they did some other shows here and there. I think like New Japan does a few shows, like the tag league that they do their Super Juniors league, and they do their just general G1 Climax or whatever. Those are a little bit different. They're always tournaments in that format, in that regard, and they're all almost standard rules, so to speak, I suppose, for wrestling. But it's just one of those things that the concept around which that tournament or those tournaments are built is kind of an ingrained thing. You know that you're going to sit down and you're going to watch a whole bunch of tournament matches, or a whole bunch of tag tournament matches, whatever else it is, or you're going to see a very, Super Junior style, a very X Division style, whatever it is, in those sorts of matches. I think seeing some of that is fine, but again, it's one of those things where you've got to have that perspective of saying, well, if we're going to have Destination X come back, and I would like to see it come back, honestly. I would like to see the tournaments come back. I would like to see Team Canada, Team Mexico, Team Japan, all that stuff. I would love to see all that kind of stuff where, or even like, again, you can bring in the Team USA or whatever else it is. And again, I think it's good. Some of that's good storytelling where you've got like somebody who's a rival to somebody else, and they've got to team up in this thing. And I can't remember the name of it, but WCW used to do that like random. Was it Blood Bowl or not Blood Bowl? I don't remember the name of it. Tournament where they'd pair you up with somebody random else on the roster for one night only. And you'd have to try to win the tag team tournament. But yeah, I think having some of these matches, knockouts, knockdown, like I was about to say, it really doesn't phase as much just to see a night of female wrestling. You know, I don't think that that's like that all that silly or all that like far out to kind of do. I think like, and I kind of think that they should try to do this more, especially now, is like try to like say, okay, instead of just like a show where we have a bit of everything, sometimes we might have a show that is just, you know, for the X Division, or it revolves around things happening with the X Division, or it features X Division stars getting more of an opportunity, or it features more women getting more opportunities or doing more things or whatever else it is. Or it features more of the tag teams or whatever else it is, and we have more of a big tag team, you know, sort of tournament or something else. I think they've tried a lot of these things in the past, maybe not the tag team thing as much, like it's not as well known, they're not as well known for having their tag team sort of pay-per-views or whatever, or their tag team eliminator matches. Actually, if I remember the Bound for Glory series, I don't think I really ever got to watch any of them, but bring back the Bound for Glory series. Same thing, like, people love that, and it's just like one of those things that, you know, is synonymous with TNA, and I know some people say, oh, it's silly and it's too much to keep track of, or whatever else, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, and the only thing that matters is the last match, or whatever else it is. I understand that 100%, but you've got to try to put stakes, more stakes on every single match than just, it's a match, and hey, whoever moves on will be facing the next person in the rounds. You know, you've got to make it, you know, not just stakes, you've got to make it a part of stories. You've got to have somebody like Tajiri or whoever else that's in there. They did this great in the Cruiserweight Classic, you know, where they had a bunch of these people. Some of them were old timers, and some of them were, you know, like young kids, and some of them were from here and there and whatever else. They were from the other promotions, and like they didn't get in or didn't get through because, well, they didn't want to sign or whatever else it was. But they still showcased a lot of this talent, which was amazing. And that's another thing that they should really do, is just be like, you know what, let's open the doors. Let's let anyone come in and, you know, let's, you know, for a few weeks or whatever it is, or a few months or whatever it is, and do something with them for a few weeks. Let's showcase, like they did this with, was it Lucha Underground or was it AAA, where a bunch of their guys came in and wrestled a bunch of the TNA guys or Impact guys back in the day. They should just do that again and do it maybe once every year. Like, again, like why not? Like they have, they had gone to WrestleCade, and I was like, dude, why don't you do like Multiverse United again? Like, let's, you know, and I guess it's one of those things. It's a little bit like, well, then it's really predictable that you're going to have a whole bunch of this stuff sort of going on, and or you've kind of got to have a surprise, and it's like, well, you know, like we don't want to just surprise people. Like we want to build up rivalries and we want to build up stories. So I get that, but again, it's just like, you could do that instead of just like saying, hey, this person, they're going to fight this person. Okay, but we're all, you know, like, or whatever it is, they're actually going to be on our TV weeks and weeks and weeks in advance or whatever it is, and they're going to win a match of some sort, or at least a few matches of some sort on our shows, and then like in a few weeks time they're going to say, hey, I challenge you at this place, whatever it is. you know um some people, you can get away with it, but it's really still really tough to sort of get away with this sort of thing of saying, oh, this person that hasn't been here in months or whatever it is, or hasn't even been here, gets a title shot. It was like, I don't know why it really worked with Mustafa Ali, but like he was a great heel after that, and he had a really good run. And it's like, well, if he had had like any real matches before that, it would have like damaged his run, because it would have been like, oh, okay, well, he's already beaten half the roster and now he hasn't got hardly anyone to face. So it's like, well, what's he going to do? So I get that. It does make some amount of sense, but in my opinion, it was a little bit of another one of these things where it's like, damn, bro, you're just giving again to the ex-WWE guys. And I get it's tough to not, get that, hot reaction or whatever else it is in some ways, because again, it's one of those things that no one's ever happy with what they do. If they bring in the WWE guy and say, okay, we'll give you the title or whatever, people complain because they say, oh, you're just bowing down to the WWE and just giving them titles that they didn't earn or whatever else and all that. And I agree that's not how it should be, but they certainly should earn it. It's definitely. But I think Mustafa Ali earned that title over his reign, sort of more so, which was fine, I think. As I sort of said, it would have been a little bit silly if he had beaten a whole lot of people. I mean, maybe he could have beaten one or two people or whatever it was, but winning the title on his debut was kind of like a big thing or whatever else, and it did put the title into the main event, which was important. And I feel like they should do that sort of thing more. They should say, okay, instead of the regular main event, like they had the women main event a few times here and there as well, but they haven't had the X Division title main event very much. But again, I guess it's sort of got to fit the purpose and fit the build. But again, it's just one of those things where you should say, okay, we're going to say, let's give you guys the main event and let's friggin' see you pull out all the stops, give us a show, like you can't do the same thing as they did it, back in the day. But again, you can do a lot of stuff, and you can, really put on a show out there if you get that opportunity. But again, anyway, one of those things is like going for that other thing, like saying, let's do something different. Let's bring in, like a lot of people have been saying, bring back Lockdown or bring back Lethal Lockdown. It's tough to bring back the 6 sides of Steels. I know people want the 6 sides of Steel back. People want the 6 sides of Ring back, but whatever. It's probably not coming back, unfortunately. And again, it's one of those things of saying, well, it's a pretty small ring, honestly. So it's going to be really hard, besides like tag team matches or whatever, to like, that would be like almost the upper limit. Like having 2 tag teams or maybe 3 tag teams in there would probably be as many people as what you could fit in there. And it would get a pretty blurry sort of action there, because it's like, well, there's no real semblance of law and order in the cage, is there? And it really, again, it shouldn't be just, oh, it's September or whatever else it is. It's like time for the cage match. It should be like, okay, let's bring this out and let's do something with it. I've said a few times it should have been used for the system, and before that, it probably should have been used on Honor No More, and it should have been used on Violent by Design, and a few other like factions and whatnot that have been in TNA, over the last few years. I don't love factions. I do think like having 1 or 2 factions here or there is really cool. But honestly, it's a bit much, and it's like, it's always hard to maintain the sort of factions sort of going together and whatnot, because everyone's sort of out for their own glory to some extent. But yeah, no, I think like the shows that are branded, well, I think shows need branding, but I think shows that are branded with like a stipulation, like the Royal Rumble or whatever, Hell in a Cell, Elimination Chamber, Survivor Series, these sorts of shows, they get, Money in the Bank, they get the mixture right, where it's like, it's the major focus or major focuses of the show. It's not just the one thing that you see on the show, like Hell in a Cell was, or whatever else. Like Extreme Rules is maybe the only one that I can think of, that really fit. That's like true. It's like a whole, like not literally a whole bunch of stipulations, but it's a whole bunch of stipulations fall under that sort of banner of Extreme Rules, hardcore, whatever. And I think like ECW used to do that kind of a lot as well. And I think that like people remember like the best parts of it, like the ECW era, and like they used to have hardcore. No, what was it? Not Hardcore Heaven. I can't think of the name of it. No, I can't think of. Was it hard times or something like that? I don't remember now. Sorry, my brain is not being able to remember it. But you know what I mean, when they had that full ECW like reunion, tribute show, and they kept trying to do that. It was like, yeah, it kind of worked once. It didn't really work after that because you're just trying too hard to have too many hardcore matches, and just having too many hardcore matches on one show often just, again, sort of results in like blandness. And this is something that I talked to somebody about before, like how many matches should be on a card. And I think it's like 6 or 7, thereabouts, something like that. It depends, but like, I think like any more than like maybe 6 or 7 is starting to push too many matches on a show, because each match needs the time to settle in and kind of also kind of be not forgotten, but sort of be digested by the fans. You can't just go from one thing to the next thing so much. You need a sort of moment there for fans to go, oh, okay, that's what happened, and okay, this is what they're doing about it. You see the Rascals go out there in one of these sorts of style matches or whatever it is, and they do something, they win or they lose, whatever else it is. After they win or lose, you don't just see them disappear or whatever else it is. It's like, well, you see them there, and they're especially if they've won and they haven't won for months or whatever it's been, they're cheering and they're carrying on for a while or whatever it is. They're really, crying and celebrating, and they're, like euphoric, and they're, going into the crowd and having a moment with the crowd, or whatever else it is. But again, like that sort of thing, or they've suffered a huge loss, like same sort of thing. They're sort of, commiserating, and they're really like going, oh man, like you're not just seeing, oh, okay, they lost and then something else is going on. I know it's TNA and we want to see something else, we don't want to just linger too long on some of these things, because you can't linger on these things all the time again. But it's one of those things, sometimes you need those moments. That's what draws people in. That's what connects people to these characters, in seeing, oh, they got beat up, they got really beat up, but they got, like the live audience, I guess, gets to see it. But when you're seeing it on pay-per-view or on TV, you need those moments to really help you connect with these characters and these moments and these things that are going on. That's where you've got to, and these stories, like, again, like, none of this matters if you don't decide to bring back some of these matches or some of these ideas. Okay, I guess it's a little bit annoying not to see some of it come back, because it's like, certainly I do think that some of it needs to come back. But again, it's like, well, if no story ever suits it, then it's like obvious, well, there's no point in bringing something like that back for no purpose, no payoff or whatever. But there's always going to be these stories or these types of things where they might make sense. So just to say, oh, we're not going to bring it back well, why not? Like, let's just do it. Like, and just to say, oh, well, we've never done it like that before or whatever it's been. Well, who cares? Let's just, again, innovate. That's what these things were for. They were for innovating. And yes, you have done singles matches in the 6 sides of steel or in 4 sides of steel or whatever else it is. You know, I just love the name 6 Sides of Steel. I love that. That sounds like really, really great. I don't know how you could get 6 sides of steel. I can see that you're getting 5 sides of steel very easily because you can just put a roof on the damn thing. But six is really tough unless you're actually gonna make like almost like a lion's den of some sort, like a box that's actually like a fully like steel box. Like that would be kind of weird. Maybe that might work. I don't know. Like, or maybe like the shark cage type thing, but like you have I don't know what do they call it, the skywalking match, where you have the planks on the top of the ladders or whatever, on top of the pylons or whatever else it is. It's sort of like a ladder match, but not really. I think they're pretty darn dangerous, and it's one of those things that the spectacle of seeing them up there and not being able to really do a whole lot is sort of like wears off pretty quickly. It's pretty boring to actually watch those matches for the most part, even when they're turning up the drama and whatnot and trying to do some very like sort of risky things. It's like, well, yeah, but it's a really slow sort of pacing to it all and whatnot. So, you know, and you can only really have 1 or 2 guys up there fighting at a time. You know, and it is really, just really looks messy, and people can't really see that far up. They've really got to have the cameras to sort of showcase a lot of that for the fans in attendance, because they can't really see much of it unless they're actually dangling below it. But again, that sort of style of thing where you can say, okay, let's take a concept here. Like they took War Games or whatever it was, and they said, okay, well, let's take that concept, we'll change it a little bit, we'll open up the roof so that, you know, people can fly off the top, because, you know, that's something that people really like. I think, like, people like seeing Kurt Angle moonsault off the top and things like that. Like, those are, like, or seeing, like, Elix Skipper Hurricane Runner off the top. It was like, or, you know, Snooker Splash off the top. It's like, those are still moments that people, you know, and they're not all TNA moments, but again, like, some of those moments are still moments people talk about. So it's just one of those things of saying, well, we've got to open up the roof because, you know, or 9 times out of 10 open up the roof. Or like when AJ Styles, and I think he'd done this a few times, and even Jeff Hardy, I think, did this a few times, where they decided to get on the roof of the Lethal Lockdown and fight on the roof. And I think one time AJ went through the actual like roof. But yeah, taking those sorts of ideas and saying, okay, well, how can we do something like that? Not the same, but how can we do something like that? They did that years ago with the King of the Mountain match. They did the same thing of saying, okay, let's have a ladder match, you know, basically where you go to get the title, but the difference is you have to pull down the title, and the other difference is, hey, you've got these boxes that you could put people in timeout effectively, and it's a 6-man match or a 5-man match or whatever else it is. You know, it's like Money in the Bank, but you can put people into timeout boxes, and except you have to put the title or the whatever on the rungs rather than pulling it down. So, you know, like, that's one of those things. Like, some people think it's too many rules, or it's too much, or it's overbooked, or whatever else. Again, I do agree in some forms and some fashions, but again, it's just one of those things of saying, well, like, try to do something, like, and some people, as I say, you can't please anyone. You say, oh, well, we'll do exactly the same thing as WWE is doing, and then everyone complains and saying, well, you're doing exactly the same thing that WWE is doing. You can't do exactly the same thing that WWE is doing. And then if we go along and go and do something or try to innovate something different, something unique, everyone goes, oh, you can't do your own unique thing. Do the same thing the WWE is doing, and whatnot. You can never please people. So it's just one of those things of it. Like, again, it's just one of those things. But yeah, I think it would be cool, obviously, to see some of this like classic sort of style stuff come back. Things that people have fond memories of. Actually, I don't know whether you could like make the Bound for Glory series its own like thing. But you like it's obviously its own thing, but it like its own show in a way. I don't know. Obviously, you can make it its own matches, or you put that thing there of saying this is a tournament for the Bound for Glory series, blah blah blah. Again, same thing. Put it for an X Division title series, and maybe have like a couple of matches on the pay-per-view. Because again, I feel like having too many matches on the pay-per-view, sort of does water it down and does make it like it takes way too long to get to the payoff type thing. Like sometimes you can do it or whatever, but again, it's very like they did it at WrestleMania. I think it was 6. I think. Maybe it was 5. I can't remember. Was it 4? I don't remember. Sorry, anyway, whatever. But, and then they did it at Survivor Series 97, 98? Maybe 99. I can't remember. One of those ones. I'm not remembering which one's which. I don't remember, sorry. But yeah, anyway, it's one of those things of saying this is something, for this, like this night revolves around this thing or whatever else it is, the Royal Rumble, whatever else it is, doesn't matter what it is. Again, the whole concept is to see this specific end goal of this series or this match or that stipulation or whatever else it is. Like just having that little bit of extra sauce sometimes, or that extra sort of thing for people to sort of gravitate towards or see sometimes here and there will be something that, people will want to see. So just giving it to them, like, is well worth the time. It's not that hard to erect a steel cage around the ring and say it's lockdown, or it's lethal lockdown or whatever else it is. It might not be exactly the same as what they did back in the day, but again, you can say, this is a 1v1, lethal lockdown, or it's a tag team lethal lockdown, or whatever else it is, so that these guys settle their feud, and whatnot, or whatever else it is. So, or, like it could be anything. Again, or you could use it as a vehicle to say, okay, same with like the Royal Rumble and with Elimination Chamber, making it like an elimination match or some sort of variant of an elimination match where it's like, okay, these guys have to participate in the reverse battle royal, or whatever else it is, to earn a shot at Bound for Glory or earn a shot at the title. That's going to be its own pay-per-view, which sets up not maybe the next pay-per-view. I don't know. It depends. It's hard to not just be like it sets up the next pay-per-view, because it's like, well, yeah, it's right around the corner. But then if you've got like a couple of months to build to it, it's like, well, yeah, that's really good. But again, it starts becoming, well, what are you going to do in that time? Because it's like there's so much time between now and whenever the time period is that you're saying that you're trying to build towards. Maybe a month, or maybe like they have their tentpole pay-per-views every 3 months or so, I think it is, or 4 months or whatever it is. So saying, okay, we're going to have this match that's going to determine the number one contender, but the number one contender is going to happen at, from now to Slammiversary or to Rebellion, or from Rebellion to Slammiversary or whatever else it is, or from Slammiversary to Bound for Glory. That might actually work, because there's like, that's a pretty big, like, good window, and they're actually pretty close together in some regards, so that might work. I don't know. It's tough to say. But again, just adding that little extra layer of something else, might be, like, I don't know whether you can make it its own pay-per-view, But again, it's like having something like that that's an annual thing, and I know they've got their quality shot gauntlet, whatever. But again, it's like having something else. It's not just a trophy, or it's not just the feast or fight or whatever else it is. It's this thing that, again, sort of finds its way into the calendar on a regular basis. Like, it's hard because, again, people want to see something different sometimes as well. So it's like, maybe you're saying, oh, the Bound for Glory series should come back. It's like, well, like, then why are we doing a Royal Rumble, or why are we doing this, or why are we doing that for, to set it up? It's like, well, maybe that's the thing that you should set up, this annual tradition of saying, let's do this every year. But I know some people say, well, that gets in the way of storylines or whatever, but you obviously have your quote-unquote favorites or whatever, but you've got to keep these stories going of saying, well, who's going to win the title? Is, Frankie Kazarian going to beat Nick Nemeth for the title, or whatever else it is? And then if he does, well, is Joe Hendry going to get through the series to win the number one contendership? Or, is Josh Alexander going to win the tournament, or whoever else is in it? And is Nick Nemeth going to retain? Because, like, if Nick Nemeth retains, then Josh Alexander might be the one to win. Or if he doesn't retain, then this person might, you could be like, oh, every single person in this could win it. I like the multi-man matches, like, as well, but it's like, it does get a little bit chaotic to sort of, and I don't mind that too much, but again, it's one of those things sometimes, it's like, the more bodies you kind of throw in there, the less you can kind of do with it, and the more, like, some people are, taking a rest or whatever else it is, because it's like, oh, if you're doing some heel work, it might be all right, because it's like, we can understand, or you're trying to pick your spot or something like that. But it's like, if you're just on the outside, you're gonna lose to somebody just being like, unless it's elimination style. Again, you're just gonna lose to the fact that somebody just won because you weren't in the ring. You were just like, oh, I might stay here and hope for the best, and whatever else. You've got to be on the ball and being like, no, I've got to defend every pinfall or submission so that I can be in there and trying to win or whatever. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it anyway, guys, for this one. Hope you guys have enjoyed, and hope you guys will join me again in another one.